The stagecoach rattled into Pahrump, Nevada, just as the sun began its descent behind the distant mountains, and Victoria Daniels pressed her face against the dusty window, watching the settlement materialize from the desert heat like a mirage she wasn't entirely certain would hold solid. She had traveled 3 weeks to reach this isolated town, fleeing a brothel in San Francisco, where she had been held against her will for 2 years. And now, at 21 years old, she carried nothing but the stolen dress on her back, and a desperate hope that nobody would follow her this far into the Nevada territory. The year was 1877, and Pahrump existed as little more than a scattering of weathered buildings along a dirt road, surrounded by endless stretches of desert scrub and the promise of water from underground springs that made life barely sustainable in this harsh landscape. Victoria climbed down from the coach on unsteady legs, her body aching from the journey, her throat parched despite the water she had rationed carefully. The driver tossed down her small bundle without ceremony and clicked his tongue at the horses, already preparing to move on toward his next destination. She stood alone in the street as dust settled around her boots, watching the few townspeople who had emerged to collect mail and packages eye her with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Women were scarce in places like this, and a young woman arriving alone raised questions that Victoria had no intention of answering honestly. She pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders despite the lingering heat, and looked around for somewhere to inquire about work and lodging. The saloon seemed like the obvious choice, but Victoria's stomach turned at the thought of walking through those swinging doors. She had seen enough saloons to last a lifetime. Instead, she noticed a general store across the street, its painted sign faded but still legible, and made her way toward it with as much confidence as she could muster. The interior was dim and cooler than the street, packed with goods from floor to ceiling in an organized chaos that spoke of years of accumulated inventory. An older woman stood behind the counter, her gray hair pulled back in a severe bun, her weathered face breaking into a cautious smile as Victoria approached. "Help you, miss?" the woman asked, her tone neither welcoming nor hostile. "I am looking for work," Victoria said, keeping her voice steady. "And a place to stay, if possible. I can cook, clean, sew. I learn quickly." The woman studied her for a long moment, taking in the quality of Victoria's dress despite its travel-worn state, the bruises that had faded to yellow shadows on her wrists, the way she held herself with a strange combination of dignity and defeat. "You running from something, or to something?" Victoria met her gaze directly. "Does it matter?" "In a town this size, everything matters eventually," the woman replied. "But I suppose we all got our reasons for being where we are. Name is Martha Greene. My husband runs the store with me. We could use some help, and there is a small room in the back we've been using for storage. You could clear it out, make it livable." Relief flooded through Victoria, so suddenly that her knees went weak. "Thank you. I will work hard. I promise you that." "Wages are not much, but you will get meals and that room," Martha said. "We will try it for a week, see how it goes." Victoria agreed immediately, and Martha showed her to the back room that would become her first real home in longer than she cared to remember. It was barely larger than a closet, filled with crates and broken furniture, but it had a small window that let in light and a door that could be closed. The thought of having a space that was truly hers, even this humble space, made Victoria's throat tighten with emotion she refused to let show. She spent the rest of the afternoon clearing the room, stacking crates in the storage area, sweeping out dust and debris. Martha brought her a thin mattress and some bedding that had seen better days but was clean and smelled of soap. As darkness fell outside, Victoria stood in her tiny room and realized with a strange, hollow feeling that she was completely alone for the first night in years, without someone watching her, controlling her movements, demanding things she had been powerless to refuse. The freedom should have felt triumphant, but instead it felt precarious and frightening. She lay down on the mattress without undressing, pulling the single blanket over herself, and stared at the ceiling in the darkness. Nobody had ever tucked her in at night, not even as a child. Her mother had died when Victoria was 6, and her father had been a drunk who could barely remember she existed. She had been on her own in one way or another for 15 years, learning to survive, but never quite learning to feel safe. The desert night grew cold quickly, and the thin blanket provided little warmth. Victoria curled into herself, shivering, trying to convince her body to relax enough to sleep. Tomorrow she would start her new life, such as it was. Tomorrow she would begin to figure out how to be a person again, instead of property. She was still awake when she heard footsteps outside her window sometime after midnight. The crunch of boots on the sandy ground behind the store. Her whole body went rigid with fear, her mind immediately conjuring images of the men from San Francisco who might have tracked her here. But the footsteps passed by without stopping, and eventually Victoria heard a door close somewhere nearby, probably one of the neighboring buildings. Sleep came in fragments, and she woke before dawn, feeling exhausted and disoriented. Martha found her already sweeping the store floor and gave her an approving nod. "You do not waste time. Good. Help me get the morning bread ready, and then you can mind the counter while I work on inventory." The days developed a rhythm quickly. Victoria worked from dawn until well after dark, learning the store's stock, serving the handful of customers who came through, slowly earning Martha's trust and even a few cautious words of approval. She met Martha's husband, a quiet man named Samuel, who seemed content to let his wife run things and spoke only when absolutely necessary. They were kind in their reserved way, and Victoria was grateful for their willingness to give her a chance without pressing too hard about her past. On her fourth evening in Pahrump, Victoria was closing up the store when a man walked in just before she could lock the door. She looked up and felt her breath catch in her throat, not from fear, but from the sudden awareness that she was looking at someone who seemed to embody everything she had imagined about the West when she was still young enough to have romantic notions. He was tall and lean, probably in his mid-20s, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes that were somewhere between brown and gold in the lamplight. His clothing marked him as a working cowboy, worn but well-maintained, covered in the dust of a long day. He carried himself with an easy confidence that spoke of someone comfortable in his own skin, and when he smiled at her apologetically, Victoria felt something she had thought was beaten out of her long-ago stir in her chest. "Sorry to come in so late," he said, his voice a low drawl that held genuine warmth. "Just got back from moving cattle and realized I am out of tobacco. Martha usually keeps some behind the counter." Victoria found her voice, though it came out softer than she intended. "I can get that for you." She retrieved the tobacco, trying not to seem like she was studying him too obviously, and wrapped it carefully. He paid, thanked her with that same easy smile, and turned to leave. Then he paused at the door and looked back at her. "You are new in town," he said, and it was a statement rather than a question. "I am Grant Vaughn. I work at the Double R Ranch, about 5 miles east of here." "Victoria Daniels," she replied, clutching the counter edge. "I am helping at the store." "Well, Miss Daniels, welcome to Pahrump," Grant said. "It is not much, but most of the folks here are decent enough once they get to know you." He tipped his hat to her and left, and Victoria stood frozen in place for several moments afterward, her heart beating faster than it had any right to. She told herself firmly that she was being ridiculous, that she had no business thinking anything at all about a man she had just met, that she needed to focus on surviving and staying hidden and nothing else. But that night, lying on her mattress under her inadequate blanket, she found herself thinking about Grant Vaughn's smile and the genuine kindness in his voice, and for the first time since arriving in Pahrump, she felt something other than fear. 3 days passed before she saw him again. This time it was late afternoon, and he came into the store with another cowboy, both of them needing supplies for the ranch. Victoria served them efficiently, keeping her expression neutral, but she noticed how Grant's eyes followed her movements and how he seemed to be taking his time selecting items he probably could have grabbed in half the time. "How are you settling in?" he asked, while his companion was examining harness leather at the other end of the store. "Well enough," Victoria said carefully. "The Greens have been kind." "They are good people," Grant agreed. He hesitated, then added, "I noticed your light was on pretty late the last few nights. Room above the store, right?" Victoria felt a flash of alarm. "You have been watching me?" "No, nothing like that," Grant said quickly, and she could see he was genuinely concerned about her taking it the wrong way. "I rent a room in the boarding house next door. My window faces that direction. I just happened to notice, that is all. I was not trying to intrude." She relaxed slightly, realizing he was telling the truth. "I have trouble sleeping sometimes, new place and all." "I understand that," Grant said. "Took me a while to get used to town noise when I first came here. I grew up on a ranch in Texas, and the quiet was what I was used to. All these buildings close together felt strange for months. His companion called him over to look at something, and the moment passed, but Victoria found herself thinking about the conversation throughout the evening. It occurred to her that Grant had been trying to make conversation, trying to be friendly, and she had nearly bitten his head off. She was so used to being suspicious of men's intentions that she had forgotten some of them might actually just be decent human beings. That night was particularly cold, and Victoria woke around midnight, shivering so hard her teeth were chattering. She wrapped the blanket around herself and tried to generate warmth by moving around the tiny room, but the desert cold seemed to seep through every crack in the walls. She finally huddled on the mattress, pulling her knees to her chest, wondering if she would ever feel truly warm again. A soft knock on her door made her freeze. It was too late for anyone to have legitimate business with her, and fear shot through her system like ice water. She did not answer, barely breathing, hoping whoever it was would go away. "Miss Daniels?" Grant's voice came through the door, quiet and careful. "I saw your light go out and then come back on. Are you all right?" Victoria stood on shaking legs and went to the door, opening it just a crack. Grant stood there holding a thick blanket folded over his arm, his expression concerned in the lamplight from the store's main room. "I am fine," she said, but another shiver ran through her even as she spoke the words. "You are freezing," Grant said bluntly. "Look, I know this is going to sound strange, and you do not have any reason to trust me, but I have an extra blanket. Good wool, thick. I want you to have it." Victoria stared at him, unable to process the gesture. "Why?" "Because you are cold, and I have something that could help. And it is not right to let someone suffer when you could do something about it," Grant said simply. He held out the blanket. "That is all. No strings, no expectations. I will leave it here and go if that makes you more comfortable." He set the blanket on the crate just inside her door and stepped back, clearly giving her space. Victoria looked at the blanket, then at him, then back at the blanket. It was beautiful, woven in a pattern of blue and gray, clearly expensive and well made. "I cannot take this," she said. "It is too valuable." "It is just sitting in my room doing nothing," Grant replied. "My mother sent it to me from Texas, and I already have enough blankets. Please, Miss Daniels, let me help." There was something in his voice, a genuine earnestness that cut through all of Victoria's defenses. She picked up the blanket, feeling the weight and warmth of it, and felt tears prick her eyes for the first time since leaving San Francisco. "Thank you," she whispered. "I do not know what to say." "You do not have to say anything," Grant said gently. "Just stay warm. That is enough." He tipped his hat to her and left, walking quietly through the store and out the back door. Victoria stood holding the blanket, feeling its softness against her skin, and something inside her chest that had been frozen for 2 years began to thaw just slightly. She spread the blanket over her existing thin one and lay down, and for the first time since arriving in Pahrump, she was actually warm. She pulled the wool up to her chin and breathed in the scent of it, clean and somehow comforting, and let her eyes close. Sleep came easier than it had in months. The next morning, Victoria found herself watching the door of the store, hoping Grant would come in so she could thank him properly. But it was Martha who noticed the new blanket when she came to check on Victoria's room. "That is fine wool," Martha observed. "Where did you get it?" Victoria hesitated, then decided on honesty. "Grant Vaughn brought it by last night. He said I needed it more than he did." Martha's eyebrows rose, but her expression was thoughtful rather than disapproving. "That sounds like Grant. He is one of the good ones, that man. Works harder than anyone I know, sends most of his wages back to his family in Texas. His father died a few years back, left his mother and 3 younger sisters to manage. Grant came out here because the pay is better than he could get back home." This information painted a picture of Grant that made Victoria's throat tighten. He had so little for himself, and yet he had given her one of his few valuable possessions without a second thought. "I want to repay him somehow," Victoria said. "Make him a good meal," Martha suggested. "Man like that working all day out in the weather, he would appreciate some home cooking. Lord knows the ranch cook is about as talented as a fence post. You can use our kitchen, and I will provide the ingredients. Consider it a bonus for the good work you have been doing." Victoria spent her lunch break that day preparing a beef stew with vegetables and fresh bread, working with an attention to detail that surprised even herself. She wanted it to be perfect, wanted to show Grant that his kindness had meant something. When the food was ready, she packed it carefully in a basket with a cloth over the top to keep it warm. Martha gave her directions to the Double R Ranch and told her to take the afternoon off. "You have been working yourself to the bone," she said. "Go deliver your meal and get some fresh air. It will do you good." The walk to the ranch was longer than Victoria expected, but the weather was mild for late autumn, and she found herself enjoying the openness of the landscape after being cooped up in the store. The ranch buildings came into view as the sun began its descent, a collection of barns and corrals and a large main house that looked well maintained. An older man emerged from the barn as she approached, his face weathered and skeptical. "Help you, miss?" "I am looking for Grant Vaughn," Victoria said. "I brought him something from town." The man's expression softened slightly. "Grant is with the horses in the far corral. I will take you over." He led her past the main barn to a large corral where several horses moved restlessly. Grant was inside with a young colt, working with a patience and gentleness that made Victoria stop and watch for a moment before announcing her presence. The colt was skittish, dancing away from Grant's outstretched hand, but Grant just kept talking to it in a low, soothing voice, never rushing, never forcing. Eventually, the colt came close enough for Grant to touch its neck, and Victoria saw him smile with genuine pleasure at the small victory. The older man called out to him, and Grant looked up, his eyes widening with surprise when he saw Victoria standing there. He climbed out of the corral carefully, not wanting to startle the colt, and walked over to her. "Miss Daniels, is everything all right?" "Everything is fine," Victoria said quickly. "I wanted to thank you properly for the blanket, and Martha suggested I bring you a meal. I made stew and bread." Grant looked at the basket in her hands and then at her face, and something in his expression made Victoria's heart beat faster. "You did not have to do that." "I wanted to," Victoria said firmly. "You did something kind for me, and I wanted to do something kind for you, if that is acceptable." "More than acceptable," Grant said softly. "That is about the nicest thing anyone has done for me in a long time. Would you like to sit for a bit? There are benches over by the barn, and the sunset is going to be beautiful tonight." Victoria agreed, and they walked together to the bench, settling at a respectful distance from each other. Grant uncovered the basket and made a sound of appreciation that was almost comical in its sincerity. "This smells incredible," he said. "I might just eat the whole thing right now." "Please do," Victoria said. "I made it for you." Grant ate with the focused attention of someone who worked physically demanding days and needed the fuel, but he also kept trying to make conversation between bites, asking Victoria about how she was settling in, whether she liked working at the store, what she thought of Nevada compared to wherever she had come from. Victoria found herself relaxing more than she had with anyone in years, answering his questions with growing honesty, though she was still careful to avoid the specifics of her past. Grant did not push, seeming content to learn about her in small increments, and he shared stories about the ranch and the other cowboys and the challenges of working with cattle in the desert. "It is different from Texas," he said, gazing out at the landscape. "Harsher in some ways, but there is something about it that gets into your blood. The space, the quiet at night when you are out on the range, makes you feel small but also like you are a part of something bigger, if that makes any sense." "It does," Victoria said quietly. "I never felt that in cities. Everything there feels closed in, like there is never enough air to breathe properly." "Is that where you came from? A city?" Victoria hesitated, then nodded. "San Francisco." "That is a long way," Grant observed. He looked at her carefully. "You do not have to tell me anything you do not want to, but I want you to know that whatever brought you here, you are safe now. I will make sure of that." The words were spoken with such quiet certainty that Victoria felt her eyes sting with tears. "You do not even know me." "I know enough," Grant said. "I know you work hard and you are kind to Martha and Samuel even when you are exhausted. I know you look over your shoulder every time someone walks past the store window, like you are expecting trouble. I know someone hurt you, and I know you are brave as hell for running and starting over. That is enough." Victoria could not speak for a moment, overwhelmed by the fact that he had seen so much, that he had paid attention to her in ways she had not realized. When she finally found her voice, it was barely more than a whisper. "Thank you for the blanket. I slept better last night than I have in longer than I can remember." "Good," Grant said simply. "You deserve to sleep without fear." They sat together in comfortable silence as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, and Victoria realized she had not felt this sense of peace in years, maybe ever. When the light began to fade, Grant walked her back toward town, carrying her empty basket and pointing out landmarks along the way, so she would know the path better next time. "Will you come again?" he asked as they reached the outskirts of Pahrump. "To the ranch, I mean. I would like to see you again, if that is something you would be comfortable with." Victoria looked at him, at his open, honest face, at the hope in his eyes that he was trying not to make too obvious. Every instinct told her to protect herself, to keep her distance, to not let anyone get close enough to hurt her again. But there was something about Grant Vaughn that made her want to take a risk, to believe that maybe not everyone in the world was cruel. "I would like that," she said. Grant's smile was worth the fear she felt at making herself vulnerable. "Sunday is my day off. Would you want to have lunch together? I could show you some of the prettier spots around here if you're interested in seeing more of the area." "I would love that," Victoria said, and meant it. That night, wrapped in Grant's wool blanket, Victoria felt truly warm for the first time in years. It was not just the physical warmth, though that was wonderful. It was the feeling of being seen and cared for by someone who asked nothing in return, someone who seemed to genuinely want her to be happy and safe. She did not let herself think too far ahead, did not let herself imagine a future that might not exist. But for now, for tonight, she let herself feel hopeful. Sunday arrived with bright sunshine and temperatures that were almost pleasant. Victoria wore her best dress, which was not saying much given her limited wardrobe, but Martha had helped her mend a torn seam and press out the wrinkles. She met Grant outside the store at noon, and he greeted her with that now familiar smile and an offer of his arm. "I thought we could walk to the springs," he said. "It is about a mile west of town, and the water is beautiful. I brought food this time, so you would not have to do all the work." They walked together through the scrub landscape, and Grant pointed out various plants and animals, sharing knowledge he had accumulated during his years working the range. Victoria found herself genuinely interested, asking questions, learning about this harsh but beautiful environment. The springs emerged from the ground in a cluster of pools surrounded by green vegetation that contrasted sharply with the surrounding desert. The water was crystal clear, and Victoria could see all the way to the rocky bottom. Grant spread a blanket in the shade of a mesquite tree and unpacked sandwiches and fruit and a jar of lemonade. "The ranch cook may not be great with daily meals, but she makes wonderful lemonade," he said, pouring some into a tin cup for Victoria. "It is about the only thing I will truly miss if I ever leave the Double R." "Are you planning to leave?" Victoria asked, surprised by how much she disliked the idea. "Not anytime soon," Grant assured her. "But eventually, I want to have my own place. Nothing huge, just enough land for a small herd and a house. Somewhere my mother and sisters could come if they wanted to, if things do not work out with the ranch in Texas." "That sounds like a good dream," Victoria said softly. "What about you?" Grant asked. "What do you dream about?" Victoria was quiet for a long moment, thinking about the question. "I used to dream about being safe, just that, nothing more. But lately I have been thinking maybe I could dream bigger. Maybe I could have a real life, not just survival." "You deserve that," Grant said with conviction. "You deserve everything good this world has to offer." They ate lunch and talked about everything and nothing, and Victoria felt layers of her protective armor slowly falling away. Grant told her about growing up in Texas, about learning to ride before he could properly walk, about his father's sudden death from a heart condition, and how it had changed everything for his family. Victoria shared carefully edited stories about her own childhood, about her mother's death and her father's drinking, about feeling alone for most of her life. "That is going to change," Grant said firmly. "You are not alone anymore. You have Martha and Samuel, and you have me. I know we have not known each other long, but I want you to understand that I am here, Victoria. Whatever you need, whenever you need it." Victoria felt tears threatening again, and she blinked them back. "Why are you being so kind to me?" Grant looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Because from the moment I saw you in that store, something in me recognized something in you. I cannot explain it better than that. I just knew that you were important, that you were going to matter to me, and every conversation we have had since then has proven that instinct right." "I have nothing to offer you," Victoria said, her voice breaking slightly. "I am nobody, with nothing." "That is the most ridiculous thing I have ever heard," Grant said gently. He reached out slowly, telegraphing his movement, and took her hand in his. His palm was rough with calluses, but his touch was gentle. "You are somebody, Victoria. You are strong and brave and kind. You survived things that would have broken other people. You are everything." Victoria looked down at their joined hands and felt something inside her chest unfurl like a flower opening to the sun. She had been touched by so many men in ways that made her feel dirty and worthless, but Grant's simple gesture of holding her hand made her feel cherished. The difference was so stark it almost hurt. They stayed by the springs until the afternoon began to cool, talking and simply being together in comfortable silence. When they finally walked back to town, Grant kept hold of her hand the entire way, and Victoria let him, marveling at how something so simple could feel so significant. As they reached the store, Grant turned to face her. "Can I see you again? Tomorrow evening, maybe? I could come by after work." "I would like that," Victoria said. "But Grant, there are things about my past that I have not told you. Things that might change how you feel about me. Unless you murdered someone in cold blood, I cannot imagine anything that would change how I feel," Grant said seriously. "And even then, I would probably need to hear the whole story before making a final judgment." Despite herself, Victoria laughed, and Grant's face lit up at the sound. "There she is," he said softly. "I have been waiting to hear you laugh." "I have not had much to laugh about in a long time," Victoria admitted. "Then I am going to make it my mission to give you reasons," Grant promised, "starting tomorrow." He left her with a gentle squeeze of her hand, and Victoria watched him walk toward the boarding house, feeling like her entire world had shifted on its axis. She went to her small room and lay down on her bed, pulling Grant's blanket up to her chin, and let herself imagine a future that had seemed impossible just weeks ago. The next evening, Grant appeared at the store just as Victoria was closing up. He had cleaned up from his workday, his hair still damp from washing, and he carried a small bouquet of wildflowers that must have taken him considerable effort to gather in the desert landscape. "For you," he said, offering them with an almost shy expression that made Victoria's heart melt. She took the flowers, inhaling their delicate scent, and felt tears prick her eyes yet again. "They are beautiful, thank you." "I thought maybe we could take a walk," Grant suggested. "It is a nice evening, and I'm not ready to say goodnight yet." They walked through Pahrump's quiet streets, and Grant pointed out the various buildings and told her stories about the people who lived and worked in them. The town was beginning to feel less foreign to Victoria, more like a place she might actually belong. When they reached the edge of town where the desert opened up before them, Grant stopped and turned to face her. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice serious. "I know we have not known each other long, but I do not believe in wasting time or hiding how I feel. Life is too short and too uncertain for games. Victoria, I am falling in love with you. I think I started falling the first time I saw you, and every moment since then has just made me more certain." Victoria's breath caught in her throat. "Grant, you do not understand. I am not who you think I am. Before I came here, I do not care," Grant interrupted gently. "I do not care what you did or what was done to you. I care about who you are right now, in this moment. I care about the woman who works until she is exhausted to earn her keep, who makes food for a near stranger out of kindness, who looks at the desert like it is the most beautiful thing she has ever seen. That is who you are to me." "I was a prostitute," Victoria said bluntly, forcing the words out before she lost her nerve. "In San Francisco. I did not choose it, I was forced into it. But that does not change what I was. What I did. I am not innocent or pure or any of the things a man should want in a woman." Grant was quiet for a moment, and Victoria braced herself for rejection, for disgust, for all the reactions she had imagined in her darkest fears. Instead, he reached out and cupped her face gently in his hands. "Did you escape?" he asked quietly. "Yes, I stole clothes and money and ran." "Good," Grant said fiercely. "I am glad you did. I am glad you were brave enough to save yourself. And Victoria, listen to me very carefully. What was done to you does not define you. It does not make you less worthy of love or respect or happiness. It makes you a survivor, and that is something to be proud of." Victoria felt tears streaming down her face, and she could not stop them even if she wanted to. "How can you say that? How can you still look at me like I am something precious?" "Because you are," Grant said simply. "You are precious to me. Nothing you have told me changes that. Nothing you could tell me would change that." He pulled her into his arms, and Victoria collapsed against his chest, sobbing with a grief and relief so profound it felt like it might tear her apart. Grant held her through it, one hand stroking her hair, murmuring reassurances that slowly penetrated the fog of her emotion. When she finally calmed enough to speak, Victoria pulled back slightly to look up at him. "I do not know how to do this, how to be with someone who actually cares about me. I do not know the rules." "There are no rules," Grant said, brushing tears from her cheeks with his thumbs. "We just figure it out together, one day at a time. The only thing I ask is that you be honest with me, and let me be honest with you. Can you do that?" "I can try," Victoria whispered. "That is all I need," Grant said. He leaned down slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, and pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. "I am going to court you properly, Victoria Daniels. I am going to show you what it is like to be treated the way you deserve, and if you will let me, I am going to love you for the rest of my life." Victoria could not speak past the lump in her throat, so she just nodded and let Grant hold her as the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky above them. The following weeks developed a pattern that became the happiest of Victoria's life. Grant came to see her every evening after work, sometimes just for a few minutes if he was exhausted, sometimes for hours if his duties at the ranch allowed. They talked about everything, building a foundation of trust and understanding that Victoria had never experienced with another person. Grant told her about his dreams for the future, his concerns about his family in Texas, his love for working with horses. Victoria slowly opened up about her childhood, her fears, her hopes that were just beginning to take tentative shape. Grant was patient with her in ways that constantly surprised her. He never pushed her physically beyond gentle hand-holding and occasional kisses on her forehead or cheek. He seemed to understand instinctively that Victoria needed to relearn what physical affection meant when it was freely given rather than demanded. Every touch was telegraphed, every embrace offered rather than taken. Martha noticed the change in Victoria and approved quietly but firmly. "Grant Vaughn is one of the good ones," she said one afternoon while they were organizing stock. "If you are smart, you will hold on to that man." "I am trying," Victoria said softly. "But I keep waiting for something to go wrong, for him to realize I am not worth the trouble." "That is your fear talking, not reality," Martha said wisely. "That man looks at you like you hung the moon, and you look at him the same way, even if you do not realize it yet. Stop waiting for disaster and start accepting happiness." The advice was simple but profound, and Victoria tried to take it to heart. She started letting herself imagine a future with Grant, started letting herself believe that maybe she could have something real and lasting and good. One evening in early December, Grant arrived at the store with an unusual expression on his face, nervous and excited at the same time. "I have something to ask you," he said. "It is a big thing, and you can absolutely say no if you want to." Victoria set down the broom she had been using and gave him her full attention. "What is it?" "The ranch is having a Christmas celebration in 2 weeks, Grant explained. "All the hands and their families, some folks from town. There will be food and music and dancing. I would like you to come with me as my guest. My official guest, so everyone knows we are courting." Victoria felt her heart beat faster. "You want people to know about us?" "I want everyone to know," Grant said firmly. "I am not ashamed or hiding anything. I am proud to be courting you, Victoria. I want the whole territory to know it if they will listen." The fierce protectiveness in his voice made Victoria feel warm all over. "Yes," she said. "I would love to go with you." Grant's face broke into a brilliant smile, and he picked her up and spun her around, making her laugh with surprised delight. When he set her down, he was still grinning. "You just made me the happiest man in Nevada." "It is a Christmas party, Grant. I hardly think that qualifies for happiest man status." "You do not understand," Grant said, suddenly serious. "You saying yes to going with me, to being seen publicly as mine, that means you trust me. That means you are letting yourself believe in us. That is worth more than all the gold in California." Victoria reached up and touched his face gently, marveling at the feeling of his skin warm under her palm. "I do trust you. You have given me every reason to, and taken away all my reasons not to. I am still scared, but I am less scared every day." "That is all I can ask," Grant said, turning his head to press a kiss to her palm. "We will go at whatever pace you need. I am not going anywhere." The 2 weeks before the Christmas celebration passed in a flurry of preparation. Martha helped Victoria alter one of her old dresses to make it more festive, adding ribbons and taking in the waist to fit better. Samuel contributed a pair of almost new boots that had been ordered by a customer who never returned to collect them. Grant was busy at the ranch preparing for the party, but he sent Victoria little notes through various townspeople who made the trip back and forth, each one making her smile with their simple declarations of affection. The night of the party arrived cold and clear, with stars blazing overhead in the desert sky. Grant came to collect Victoria in a wagon borrowed from the ranch, and his expression when he saw her was worth every moment of preparation. "You look beautiful," he said reverently. "Victoria, you are absolutely beautiful." "You look rather handsome yourself," Victoria replied, taking in his clean shirt and carefully combed hair. He offered his hand to help her into the wagon, and they set off toward the ranch with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders against the cold. The ranch house was blazing with light and warmth when they arrived, and Victoria could hear music and laughter spilling out into the night. She felt a flutter of nervousness in her stomach, but Grant seemed to sense it and squeezed her hand reassuringly. "Everyone here is going to love you," he said, "and if they do not, I will fight them." "That seems extreme," Victoria said, but she was smiling as they walked inside together. The party was in full swing, with tables laden with food and a group of musicians playing fiddles and guitars in one corner. Cowboys and townspeople mingled together, and Victoria recognized several faces from the store. Grant kept her close to his side, introducing her to people with unmistakable pride in his voice. Some people looked at her with curiosity, a few with suspicion, but most were genuinely welcoming. They ate dinner together, and Grant made sure Victoria's plate was full and that she had enough to drink. When the dancing started, he led her to the cleared space that served as a dance floor and pulled her into his arms. "I should warn you that I am not a particularly good dancer," he said as they began to move to the music. "I think you are doing just fine," Victoria replied, letting him guide her through the steps. She had been forced to dance with countless men in San Francisco, mechanical movements that meant nothing. But dancing with Grant felt completely different. It felt like joy. They danced through several songs, and Victoria found herself laughing more than she had in years, spinning and stumbling occasionally, but not caring because Grant was laughing too. When a slower song started, Grant pulled her closer, one hand on her waist and the other clasped with hers. "Thank you for coming tonight," he said softly, his breath warm against her ear. "This is the best Christmas I have had in years." "Thank you for inviting me," Victoria replied, "for wanting people to know about us. It means more than you know." "I love you," Grant said, the words coming out naturally, like he had been holding them back for days. "I know it is soon, and you do not have to say it back if you are not ready. But I needed you to hear it. I love you, Victoria." Victoria looked up at him, at his open, honest face, at the love shining clearly in his eyes, and felt the last of her walls crumble. "I love you too," she whispered. "I did not think I was capable of it anymore, but I do. I love you, Grant Vaughn." Grant's smile was radiant, and he leaned down to kiss her properly for the first time, gentle but thorough, his lips warm against hers. Victoria felt like she was falling and flying at the same time, anchored by Grant's arms around her, but also soaring with a happiness so intense it was almost frightening. When they finally broke apart, several of the other party guests were grinning at them knowingly. Grant just laughed and pulled Victoria close again, swaying with her to the music, and she rested her head against his chest and listened to his heartbeat and thought that maybe, finally, she had found home. The ride back to town that night was quiet but comfortable, Victoria tucked against Grant's side under the blanket, both of them content to simply be together. When they reached the store, Grant walked her to her door like he always did, but this time he lingered, clearly not wanting the evening to end. "Can I tell you something?" Victoria asked, looking up at him in the moonlight. "Anything. When you brought me that blanket and you made sure I was warm, that was the first time in my entire life that anyone had shown me that kind of care. Nobody ever tucked me in at night when I was a child. Nobody ever worried about whether I was comfortable or safe. You gave me something I did not even know I needed." Grant's expression was fierce with emotion. "I am going to make sure you are warm and safe every single night for the rest of your life, if you will let me. Not just with blankets, but with everything I have to give. I want to be the person who takes care of you, who protects you, who makes sure you never have to be cold or scared or alone again." "I want that too," Victoria said, her voice thick with emotion. I want all of it with you." Grant kissed her again, deeper this time, and Victoria felt desire stir in her body for the first time in a way that was not tainted by fear or revulsion. This was what it was supposed to feel like, she realized. This wanting that was mutual and joyful, not coerced or demanded. When they finally said goodnight, Victoria went to her small room and lay down under Grant's blanket, touching her lips where she could still feel the pressure of his kiss, and let herself imagine their future together. She fell asleep smiling, warm and safe and loved. Christmas came and went in a blur of happiness. Grant gave Victoria a beautiful shawl he had commissioned from a woman in town, deep blue wool embroidered with delicate flowers. Victoria gave him a shirt she had sewn herself, working on it late at night by lamplight, putting every ounce of care into making it perfect. They spent Christmas Day together at the Springs, wrapped in blankets and sharing a picnic lunch, talking about their hopes for the coming year. "I have been saving money," Grant said, as they watched the sun set over the water. "Every month I send some to my mother, but I have been putting aside the rest. I almost have enough for a down payment on land. There is a parcel about 10 miles north of here, near Better Water, that is going to come up for sale in the spring. I have been thinking about making an offer." Victoria's heart beat faster. "You are really going to do it? Start your own ranch?" "I am going to try," Grant said. "It is going to be hard work, and I will probably fail several times before I figure it out. But I think it is time. I am 26 years old, and I do not want to work for someone else my whole life." He paused, then looked at her intently. "I am also hoping that I would not be building it alone." "What do you mean?" Victoria asked, though she thought she knew. "I mean that I am hoping you will marry me," Grant said bluntly. "Not right this second, I know we need more time, but when you are ready, when you feel like you can say yes, I am hoping you will. I want to build a life with you, Victoria. I want to wake up next to you every morning and make sure you are warm every night and figure out this whole ranching thing together. I want children with you someday, if you want them. I want everything." Victoria felt tears streaming down her face again, but they were happy tears this time. "I want that too, all of it. But Grant, I cannot have children, or at least I do not think I can. In San Francisco they gave us things to prevent it, and I do not know if it did permanent damage. You should know that before you commit to me." "Then we will not have children," Grant said simply, "or we will adopt if we want them. Victoria, I am not in love with some hypothetical future. I am in love with you right now, exactly as you are. Children would be wonderful, but they are not the requirement. You are the requirement. Only you." Victoria launched herself at him, kissing him with all the love and gratitude and hope she felt burning in her chest. Grant caught her and held her close, and they stayed wrapped in each other's arms until the stars came out and the desert night grew cold enough that they had to head back to town. Winter turned to spring, and Victoria's life in Pahrump became more settled and real every day. She was no longer the suspicious stranger, but a valued member of the community, known for her work at the store and her relationship with Grant. Martha and Samuel had come to treat her almost like a daughter, and several other women in town had started including her in their gatherings and conversations. Grant bought the land in April, using every cent of his savings and taking out a loan for the rest. Victoria went with him to see it for the first time, and they stood together looking at the empty expanse that would somehow become their home. "It is not much yet," Grant admitted, "but I can see it. The house over there, barns in that direction, corrals for the horses. It is going to take years to build it all, but I can see it." "I can see it too," Victoria said, squeezing his hand. "Our home." They were married in June of 1878, in a simple ceremony at the church in Pahrump, with Martha and Samuel and a handful of other townspeople as witnesses. Victoria wore a new dress that Martha had helped her make, soft yellow fabric that made her feel beautiful and bright. Grant wore his best suit and could not stop smiling from the moment Victoria walked down the aisle. The minister pronounced them husband and wife, and when Grant kissed her, Victoria felt like she was truly starting her life for the first time. Everything before this moment had just been surviving. This was living. They spent their wedding night in Grant's room at the boarding house, which was bigger than Victoria's space at the store. Grant had filled it with wildflowers and somehow procured a bottle of decent wine. He was nervous, Victoria realized with surprise and affection, worried about making sure everything was perfect for her. "Grant," she said softly, taking his hands in hers, "you do not have to be nervous. It is just us. I know, but this is your wedding night, and after everything you have been through, I want it to be good, Grant said. I want to replace all those bad memories with good ones. Victoria felt her heart swell with love for this man, who was so careful with her, so determined to give her the best of everything. You already have, she said. Every day with you has been replacing the bad with good. Tonight is just another step in that journey. She kissed him then, putting all her love and trust into the gesture, and felt Grant relax against her. They took their time learning each other, and Grant was so patient and gentle that Victoria found herself crying at one point from the sheer overwhelming emotion of being intimate with someone who actually loved her. Are you all right? Grant asked immediately, pulling back with concern. More than all right, Victoria assured him through her tears. I am happy. This is what happy tears look like. Grant smiled and kissed her tears away, and they continued their exploration of each other until they fell asleep tangled together, Victoria's head on Grant's chest and his arms wrapped securely around her. They moved into a tent on their property while they worked on building the house. It was primitive and challenging, but Victoria found she loved the adventure of it. They worked side by side every day, Grant doing the heavy construction while Victoria helped where she could and managed the domestic tasks like cooking and laundry and maintaining their temporary home. The house took shape slowly over the summer, a simple structure of 2 rooms that would eventually be expanded but was enough to start with. They moved in during October, and Victoria cried again when Grant carried her over the threshold, both of them laughing at how sentimental she had become. It is our home, Grant said, setting her down gently in the main room. Built with our own hands. Nobody can take this from us. That first night in their house, Grant made sure Victoria was tucked into their bed with extra blankets even though the weather was still mild. I told you I would make sure you were warm every night, he said, climbing in beside her and pulling her close. That is a promise I intend to keep for the rest of our lives. Victoria snuggled against him, feeling safe and loved and utterly content. I never imagined I could have this, she said softly. A home, a husband who loves me, a future that looks bright instead of terrifying. You gave me all of that. We gave it to each other, Grant corrected gently. You saved me just as much as I saved you. Before you, I was just going through the motions, working and sending money home and not really living. You made me want to build something, to dream bigger. You made me whole. They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, and Victoria dreamed of the future they were building together. The ranch grew slowly, but steadily. Grant bought a small herd of cattle and some horses, and he proved to be as skilled at ranching as he had been at working for others. Victoria discovered a talent for managing their finances and keeping detailed records, and she also started a vegetable garden that thrived despite the harsh climate. They worked hard every day, but it was work that meant something, building their future rather than just surviving. In the spring of 1879, Victoria realized she was pregnant. She could hardly believe it, given what she had told Grant about her fears regarding fertility. She waited until she was certain before telling him, afraid to get his hopes up, only to have them dashed. When she finally shared the news one evening after supper, Grant's reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure joy, and then immediately set her down carefully like she might break. I am not made of glass, Victoria said, amused by his sudden caution. You are carrying our child, Grant said, his voice full of wonder. I am going to take very good care of both of you. He was true to his word, fussing over Victoria throughout her pregnancy in ways that were both endearing and occasionally exasperating. He made sure she was warm every night, adding extra blankets as the weather cooled, and he took over more of the physical work around the ranch, even though Victoria protested that she was perfectly capable. Their son was born in December of 1879, a healthy baby boy with dark hair and lungs that proved extremely effective. They named him Thomas after Grant's father, and Victoria fell in love with him instantly and completely. Grant was a natural father, patient and gentle with the baby, getting up in the night to help with feedings and changing without complaint. Victoria watched him walk the floor with Thomas in his arms, singing soft lullabies in his deep voice, and felt her heart expand with more love than she thought was possible to contain. You are a good father, she told him one night, as they both sat exhausted but happy after finally getting Thomas to sleep. I am trying, Grant said. I want him to grow up knowing he is loved and safe. I want him to have everything we did not have. He will, Victoria said with certainty. He has us, and that is everything. The years passed in a blur of hard work and happiness. Thomas grew into an energetic toddler who loved following Grant around the ranch, trying to help with whatever his father was doing. Victoria gave birth to 2 more children, a daughter named Sarah in 1882 and another son named James in 1884. The house expanded with the family, new rooms added as Grant and Victoria could afford the materials and time. The ranch prospered too, growing from that initial small herd to a respectable operation that provided well for the family and employed 2 ranch hands during busy seasons. Victoria's garden expanded into a small orchard, and she sold produce in town to supplement their income. They were not wealthy by any means, but they were comfortable and happy, which was worth more than all the money in the world. Martha and Samuel remained close friends, visiting often and spoiling the children shamelessly. Martha told Victoria frequently how proud she was of her, how far she had come from that frightened young woman who had stumbled off the stagecoach years ago. "You built a good life," Martha said one afternoon, while they watched the children play in the yard. "You should be proud of yourself." "I am," Victoria said honestly, "but I could not have done it without Grant. He showed me that I deserved good things, that I was worthy of love. Everything else came from that foundation." Grant continued his practice of tucking Victoria in every night, even when they were both exhausted from long days of work and child rearing. It had become a ritual, a way of reconnecting and reminding each other that they were partners in everything. He would make sure she had enough blankets, kiss her forehead, and tell her he loved her. And Victoria would feel the same sense of safety and contentment that had started with that first blanket all those years ago. In 1885, Grant's mother and sisters came to visit from Texas, finally able to make the journey after years of planning. They stayed for a month, and Victoria loved seeing Grant with his family, the joy in his face at having everyone he loved in one place. His mother embraced Victoria like a daughter, thanking her with tears in her eyes for loving her son and giving him such a beautiful life. "He writes about you constantly," his mother confided one evening while they were preparing supper together. "Every letter is full of Victoria, this and Victoria that. I have never seen him so happy." "He saved my life," Victoria said simply. "In every way a person can be saved. How could I not love him?" The visit was bittersweet when it ended, but Grant's sisters promised to come back, and there was talk of his mother eventually relocating to Nevada permanently once the youngest sister was settled. Victoria hoped that would happen, wanted Grant to have his family close after being separated for so many years. The children grew, and Victoria and Grant grew with them, learning how to be parents and partners through trial and error and a lot of love. Thomas proved to be a natural with animals like his father, already talking about having his own ranch someday. Sarah was creative and loving, always making up stories and putting on little plays with her brothers. James was the wild one, fearless and constantly getting into mischief, keeping his parents on their toes. On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1888, Grant surprised Victoria by taking her back to the Springs, where they had spent so many early afternoons together. He had arranged for Martha to watch the children, and he brought a picnic basket and blankets and wine, just like their wedding night. 10 years, he said, pouring wine into tin cups and handing one to Victoria. "A decade since I got the smartest idea of my life and asked you to marry me." "Best decision I ever made was saying yes," Victoria replied, clinking her cup against his. "Though, to be fair, you made it pretty easy by being wonderful." Grant laughed and pulled her close, and they sat together watching the water and remembering all the moments that had brought them to this point. Victoria thought about that frightened young woman who had arrived in Pahrump with nothing but hope and desperation, and she marveled at the transformation that love had wrought. "What are you thinking about?" Grant asked, reading her contemplative expression. "How far I have come," Victoria said. "How different my life is from anything I could have imagined back then. Grant, you gave me everything, a home, a family, a reason to believe in good things again. I do not know how to thank you for that." "You do not have to thank me," Grant said seriously. "Victoria, you saved yourself. You had the courage to run, to start over, to trust again after every reason not to. All I did was recognize how incredible you are and refuse to let you go. You did the hard work." "We did the hard work," Victoria corrected. "Together." "Together," Grant agreed and kissed her softly. They made love there by the springs as the sun set, slow and tender and full of the deep intimacy that comes from years of truly knowing another person. Afterward, wrapped in Grant's arms with blankets tucked around them, Victoria felt the same contentment she had felt that first night with his wool blanket, only multiplied by years of accumulated love and trust. "Are you warm enough?" Grant asked, like he always did, adjusting the blankets around her shoulders. "I am perfect," Victoria said. "Absolutely perfect." They stayed until the stars came out, talking about the past and the future, and all the ordinary beautiful moments in between. When they finally returned home, the children were already asleep, and Martha reported they had been angels, which Victoria suspected was a generous interpretation, but appreciated nonetheless. Grant checked on each of the children, tucking blankets around them and kissing their foreheads, and Victoria watched from the doorway with tears in her eyes at how much love he had to give. Then he came and took her hand, leading her to their own room, and made sure she was warm and comfortable before climbing in beside her. "I love you," he said, like he did every night. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me." "I love you too," Victoria replied, snuggling against his familiar warmth. "Thank you for always making sure I am warm. Thank you for taking care of me every single day." "That is not a chore, that is a privilege," Grant said softly. "Making sure you are safe and happy is the greatest honor of my life." Victoria fell asleep smiling, secure in the knowledge that she had found her home in this man and this life they had built together. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new challenges and joys. The ranch expanded further, and they took on more permanent ranch hands, building a bunkhouse for the workers and becoming a respected operation in the region. Thomas grew into a strong young man who took over more of the ranching responsibilities. Sarah developed a talent for teaching and started helping with the younger children in town. And James showed an aptitude for working with horses that rivaled his father's. Grant's mother did eventually move to Nevada in 1892, settling into a small house in Pahrump, where she could be close to her grandchildren but maintain her independence. Victoria loved having her nearby, and the children adored their grandmother, who spoiled them and told them stories about their father's childhood. Victoria and Grant grew older together, their hair streaked with gray, their bodies bearing the marks of hard work and hard-won happiness. But their love never diminished, never became routine or taken for granted. Grant still tucked Victoria in every night, still made sure she was warm and safe, still told her he loved her like it was the first time. In 1895, Thomas married a young woman from a neighboring ranch, and Victoria and Grant became grandparents when their first grandson was born the following year. Holding that tiny baby and watching Thomas with his son, Victoria thought about the cycle of love and family and how grateful she was to be part of it. "We did good," Grant said that night as they lay in bed, the sounds of the ranch settling around them. "Look at what we built, a family, a home, a legacy. We did really good." "We did," Victoria agreed. "And it all started because you cared enough to bring a freezing woman a blanket and make sure she was warm." "Best blanket I ever owned," Grant said with a smile. "Gave it away and got a whole life in return." They fell asleep wrapped around each other, just like they had every night for nearly 20 years, and Victoria dreamed of all the mornings still to come. The new century arrived with celebration and hope, and Victoria and Grant welcomed it, surrounded by their children and grandchildren. They were in their 40s now, still working the ranch, but letting Thomas take over more of the day-to-day operations. Victoria had started writing down her memories, wanting to preserve the story of how she and Grant had found each other for future generations, who might want to know where they came from. Sarah read some of what her mother had written and was moved to tears. "Mama, this is beautiful and so sad. I had no idea what you went through before you met Papa." "It was another life," Victoria said, touching her daughter's face gently. "And while it was painful, it led me here, to all of you. I would not change that." Grant found her later that evening, tucked away in their bedroom with her journal. "Are you writing our story?" he asked, sitting beside her on the bed. "I am trying," Victoria said. "I want our grandchildren to know how much we loved each other, how we built something real out of nothing but hope and hard work." "Read me what you wrote," Grant requested. Victoria read him the pages about their early days, about the blanket and the first time he had made sure she was warm, about falling in love and building their home. Grant listened with tears in his eyes, and when she finished, he took her hand and brought it to his lips. "You made me sound like a hero," he said gruffly. "You were my hero," Victoria said simply. "You still are. Every single day." "Then we are even, because you were mine too," Grant said. "Still are. Always will be." They put the journal away and lay down together, and Grant tucked the blankets around Victoria like always, making sure she was comfortable and warm. It was the same ritual they had performed thousands of times, but it never lost its meaning, never became just habit. It was a declaration of love, a promise kept every single night. In 1903, they celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary with a large party at the ranch, attended by family and friends from all over the region. Martha and Samuel were there, now quite elderly, but still sharp and engaged. Grant's mother was there, beaming with pride at the family her son had created. All three of their children were there with their own growing families, giving toasts and sharing stories that made everyone laugh and cry. When it was Grant's turn to speak, he stood and pulled Victoria to her feet beside him, keeping her hand firmly in his. 25 years ago, I married the most remarkable woman I have ever known. She was running from a terrible past, and I was just trying to figure out what I wanted from life. We found each other in this dusty Nevada town, and we built something neither of us could have imagined alone. Victoria, you made me the man I am. You gave me purpose and love, and the most beautiful family a man could ask for. I promise to spend the next 25 years and beyond making sure you are warm and safe and loved every single day." Victoria was crying openly, and she stood on her toes to kiss him while everyone applauded and cheered. "I love you," she said against his lips. "Forever, forever," Grant echoed. The party went late into the night, with music and dancing, and the kind of joy that comes from being surrounded by people you love. Victoria danced with Grant and with her sons and with her grandsons, and she thought about how impossible all of this would have seemed that first desperate night in her tiny room above the store. When everyone had finally left or retired to various guest rooms and bedrolls, Grant and Victoria walked outside to look at the stars. The desert night was cool but not cold, and they stood wrapped in each other's arms, taking in the vast expanse of their land and the life they had built on it. "Thank you," Victoria said softly, "for seeing me when I was invisible, for loving me when I thought I was unlovable, for making sure I was warm every single night, in every way that matters." "Thank you for letting me," Grant replied, "for trusting me with your heart when you had every reason not to trust anyone, for building this incredible life with me. I am the luckiest man who ever lived." They stood together until the cold drove them inside, and then Grant tucked Victoria into their bed, pulling the blankets up to her chin and kissing her forehead, like he had done thousands of times before. "Warm enough?" he asked, his nightly question that had become their ritual. "Perfect," Victoria answered, her nightly response that meant so much more than just physical warmth. "Absolutely perfect." Grant climbed in beside her and pulled her close, and they fell asleep in the home they had built, surrounded by the family they had created, secure in a love that had withstood time and hardship and everything else life had thrown at them. Outside, the Nevada wind whispered across the desert, carrying with it the promise of all the mornings still to come, all the nights Grant would make sure Victoria was warm, all the years they would spend loving each other with the same fierce devotion that had started with a simple blanket and a cowboy who cared enough to make sure a lonely woman was safe. The story of how they found each other would be passed down through generations, a testament to the power of kindness and love, and the courage it takes to trust again after being broken. And at the heart of it all was one simple truth that Victoria carried with her every day for the rest of her long and happy life. She had never had anyone tuck her in at night, but the cowboy made sure she was warm every evening, and in doing so, he gave her everything she had ever needed and more than she had ever dared to dream possible.